My sister laughed when she pushed me inside the storeroom. Not a nervous laugh, not an accident, an easy, careless sound, like this was a game she'd played 100 times in her head. The light snapped off behind me, and the door slammed shut with a final, hollow thud. Then came the click of the lock. "Relax," she said through the wood. "It's just for fun." The house had gone quiet an hour earlier, our parents' car disappearing down the street, their promise to be back by evening floating behind them like a lie. I had been folding laundry, counting minutes, trying not to argue with her the way we always did. She'd watched me from the doorway, arms crossed, that familiar smile sitting wrong on her face. I should have known then. I always knew too late. The storeroom smelled like dust and old cardboard. Shelves pressed in on both sides, stacked with forgotten boxes, broken appliances, winter coats sealed in plastic. I reached for the handle and twisted hard. It didn't move. I knocked, then banged, then shouted her name until my voice bounced back at me in frightened echoes. "Open it," I said, forcing calm. "This isn't funny." Her footsteps moved away. A moment later, music thumped faintly from her room. She was gone. Panic crept in slowly, like water seeping through cracks. I checked my pockets, no phone. I must have left it on the kitchen counter. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for any sign of her. Nothing but the house settling and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I slid down the door and sat on the cold floor. The darkness felt thick, heavy. I told myself it would be a few minutes, that she'd get bored, that she'd open the door and laugh and call me dramatic. She always did. This was her way, small cruelties disguised as jokes, apologies that never quite sounded like regret. Minutes stretched into something longer. My breathing turned shallow. I stood up and paced the narrow space, counting steps. 7 from wall to wall. I ran my hands over the shelves, knocking over a box of tangled wires that clattered to the floor like bones. The sound startled me, made my heart race faster. I tried the door again. Nothing. Anger flared, sharp and hot, cutting through the fear. I kicked the door and shouted until my throat burned. I imagined her outside, laughing, telling herself this would teach me something. Teach me what? That she could do anything she wanted when no one was watching? The heat rose as the afternoon wore on. The air grew stale. Sweat prickled along my neck. I peeled off my sweater and tied it around my waist, then pressed my forehead to the cool metal shelf and breathed. I thought about our parents, how they trusted her because she was older, how they called me sensitive when I complained. I thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. The music stopped. For a second, hope surged. I listened, heart hammering. Her voice drifted down the hall, light and bored. "Still alive in there?" I answered with a scream that scraped my lungs raw. She laughed again.
"Chill."
I said, "It's for fun." And then her footsteps faded, leaving me alone with the dark, the locked door, and the terrible understanding that this time, she wasn't in a hurry to let me out. After her footsteps faded, the silence changed. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It felt intentional, like the house itself had decided to ignore me. I pressed my ear to the door again, but there was nothing. No music, no TV, no movement. Just my own breathing, too loud, too fast. I tried to slow it down. In through the nose, out through the mouth. I counted again. This time my breaths instead of my steps. 10.
20.
30. Time slipped strangely in the dark. Without light, without a clock, minutes lost their shape. Everything blurred into one long stretch of waiting. My throat burned. I realized how dry it was. I hadn't brought water. I hadn't brought anything. The thought made my stomach twist. I swallowed hard and tried not to think about how long the whole day really was. I stood and examined the door more carefully. It was solid wood, old, with a simple metal lock on the outside. No keyhole on my side. I ran my fingers along the edges, searching for a gap, a weakness. Nothing. I grabbed a loose plank from a broken crate and slammed it against the door. The sound was loud, satisfying for half a second. Then it vanished into nothing. No one heard. My anger grew teeth. I shouted her name again, not begging now, but accusing. I reminded her that this wasn't funny, that she could get in trouble, that our parents would find out. My words echoed back to me, hollow and useless. I stopped shouting when my voice started to crack. The heat became unbearable. The air felt thicker with every breath, like the room was shrinking. I sat on the floor again, back against the shelves, knees pulled to my chest. My legs trembled, not from fear alone, but from the effort of holding myself together. Memories crept in uninvited. Her locking me out of her room when we were younger, hiding my shoes before school, telling our parents I'd broken things she had smashed herself. Every time, she'd smiled afterward, like she was proud of how far she could push me. I'd always thought she'd grow out of it. I laughed once, short and sharp, startling myself. Grow out of it? Trapped in a storeroom, sweating, shaking, while she enjoyed a quiet house. At some point, I heard her again. The creak of the couch, the clink of a glass. She was close, so close it made my chest ache. I rushed to the door and knocked, controlled this time, steady. "Please," I said. "I'm not okay." There was a pause, long enough for hope to rise and fall. "You're so dramatic," she replied. "Stop acting like I kidnapped you." Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not all at once, just enough to let fear spill through. I slid down the door again, hands shaking, vision blurring even in the dark. What if something happened? What if I passed out? What if she forgot? I pressed my palm to my chest, feeling my heart race, and tried to ground myself. I named things I could feel: the cold floor, the rough cardboard, the sweat on my skin. I told myself to stay awake, to stay loud if I needed to. Hours dragged on. My legs cramped. My head ached. Every sound from the house, pipes, distant traffic, the wind against the windows, felt like a reminder that the world was moving without me. And slowly, a new fear settled in, heavier than the rest. What if she wasn't going to open the door until her parents came home? And what if, by then, I wasn't the same person they'd left behind? At some point, the fear stopped screaming. It didn't disappear, it changed. It settled deep in my chest, heavy and dull, like a stone I couldn't cough up. My body felt slow, disconnected, as if I were watching myself from a distance. I knew this was bad. Panic, at least, kept you alert. This calm felt dangerous. I don't know how long I lay on the floor. My legs had gone numb, pins and needles crawling at my calves when I finally shifted. My head throbbed in time with my heartbeat. Every breath tasted stale. I tried to remember the last thing I'd eaten. Breakfast. That felt like another lifetime. I forced myself to stand again. Sitting made it easier to give up. I searched the shelves with renewed desperation, pushing boxes aside, ignoring the dust coating my hands and arms. If there was anything at all, I could use it. A tool. A bottle. A window I'd somehow missed. My fingers brushed glass, and my heart leapt, but it was only an empty jar sealed tight, useless. I shook it anyway, just to hear the sound, just to prove I still existed. I banged on the wall this time instead of the door, using the jar until my arm ached. The noise was sharp, violent. I imagined neighbors hearing it, imagined someone knocking on the front door, asking if everything was okay. No one came. My throat tightened, and I slid down again, my back scraping against the shelves. I pressed my face into my knees and breathed shallowly. I couldn't afford to pass out. I couldn't afford to be quiet. I slapped my own cheek lightly, just enough to sting, to keep myself present. Voices drifted in again, this time laughter. Not hers alone. A friend. My sister had invited someone over. The sound shattered something inside me. I rushed to the door, pounding with everything I had left. "I'm in here," I screamed. "Open the door. Please." The laughter stopped. Footsteps approached. I held my breath. "Why are you yelling?" my sister said, irritation creeping into her voice. "You're embarrassing me." "I've been in here for hours," I said, my words tumbling over each other. "I can't breathe right. I feel sick. Open the door. Now." There was silence. Then, muffled through the wood, her friend's voice. Wait, she's actually locked in there? It's just a joke, my sister replied quickly. Too quickly. She's fine. I pressed my forehead against the door, tears finally spilling. I'm not fine. Another pause. I imagined my sister rolling her eyes, weighing her options. I could almost see her face, the annoyance, the calculation. The door handle rattled slightly, just enough to make my heart leap. Then it stopped. She'll come out when our parents get home, my sister said. Drop it. Their footsteps moved away. I screamed then, not words, not pleas, just sound. Raw and broken. My throat burned, my chest hurt, but I couldn't stop. The scream turned into sobbing, my body folding in on itself as if it were trying to disappear. Something changed after that. The house felt farther away. The walls pressed in. The darkness felt alive. I hugged myself tightly, rocking slightly, whispering my own name like a spell, like a promise I was trying not to break. I realized then that this wasn't about fun. It never had been. This was about power. And as the day dragged on, with the sun moving across a sky I couldn't see, I understood something even more terrifying. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she was enjoying every minute of it. My body started betraying me in small, frightening ways. It began with dizziness. The room tilted when I stood, forcing me to grab the shelf to keep from falling. Black spots swam in front of my eyes, even in the darkness. I lowered myself back to the floor, heart pounding, sweat cooling on my skin and leaving me shivering. I pressed my hand against my chest and focused on the rhythm there. Too fast, too uneven. Each breath felt like work. I tried to remember what I'd read once about dehydration, about panic attacks, about what happens when fear and heat mix for too long. None of it helped. Knowledge meant nothing without a way out. I knocked again, weaker this time. Not banging, not screaming, just knocking like a person who still believed someone might care enough to answer. Please, I said quietly. I need water. No response. The house creaked as the afternoon wore on. Pipes ticked. Somewhere, a door opened and closed. She was moving freely, living her day, while I counted heartbeats in a dark box. The unfairness of it made my stomach twist harder than the hunger. I lay on my side and pulled my knees up, trying to conserve energy. My lips felt cracked. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I imagined cold water running over ice, imagined swallowing until the ache eased. The images tortured me. Memories flooded in again, sharper this time. Every moment I doubted myself. Every time she'd said, "You're exaggerating," and I'd believed her. I wondered if this was how she saw me now, just a reaction to provoke, a button to press when she was bored. At some point, I heard our parents' car in my head so clearly that I sat up, convinced they were home. I rushed to the door, pounding with renewed strength, shouting for them. Silence answered me. Hallucinating, I thought distantly. That scared me more than the dark. My legs cramped painfully. I tried stretching, but the muscles seized anyway, sharp pain shooting at my calves. I cried out, the sound tearing from my throat before I could stop it. I dug my nails into my arm, grounding myself in the sting. I started talking out loud then. Not to her. To myself. I narrated what I was doing, what I was feeling, as if keeping a record might keep me sane. I'm still here, I whispered. I'm still breathing. This will end. But doubt crept in with every passing minute. What if she fell asleep? What if she left the house again? What if something happened to me and no one noticed until it was too late? I forced myself to stand one last time and slammed my shoulder into the door. Pain exploded through my arm, but the door didn't move. I slid down, gasping, tears streaming freely now. Footsteps approached again, slow, casual. I froze, hope flaring despite everything. My sister's voice came through the door, calm and almost bored. You really need to stop this. You're ruining the mood. I laughed then, a broken, hysterical sound. I could die in here, I said. She paused. Just for a second. Then she replied, Don't be ridiculous. Her footsteps retreated. I sat in the darkness, clutching my aching arm, finally understanding the truth I'd been avoiding all day. To her, my fear wasn't a mistake. It was entertainment. After she walked away, something inside me went quiet. Not peaceful, empty. Like my mind had decided to shut doors one by one to survive. I stared into the darkness, eyes open, no longer expecting anything to change. Hope felt too heavy to carry. My thoughts drifted in strange loops. I remembered being little, hiding under the dining table during thunderstorms, counting seconds between lightning and thunder. I remembered promising myself I'd never be scared like that again. The memory felt borrowed, like it belonged to someone else. My mouth was so dry it hurt to swallow. Each attempt felt like dragging sandpaper down my throat. I stopped trying. My head lolled back against the shelf, and I focused on staying conscious.
Blink. Breathe.
Blink again. Time dissolved completely. There was no afternoon anymore, no evening, just darkness and the steady ache of existence. My body felt heavy, useless. My hands trembled when I lifted them, so I let them fall. Then something terrifying happened. I started to feel cold. At first, I welcomed it. The heat had been unbearable. But this was different. A deep, bone-level chill that didn't make sense. I wrapped my arms around myself, teeth chattering softly. My skin felt clammy.
Wrong.
I knew, distantly, that this was bad. Very bad. I tried to shout again, but only a hoarse croak came out. Panic flared weakly, like a dying flame. I dragged myself toward the door, leaving faint streaks in the dust behind me, and knocked with my knuckles.
Once. Twice.
I can't feel my hands, I whispered, not sure who I was talking to. Please. No answer. My vision blurred. Not from tears. Everything just smeared together. Darkness turning thicker, softer. I rested my forehead against the door, too tired to hold myself upright. I wondered, vaguely, if this was how people slipped away. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Then I heard keys. Real ones this time. Metal clinking. A lock turning in the front door. Sound rushed back into the world all at once. Voices, movement. The thud of bags hitting the floor. My heart lurched painfully. Our parents were home. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. Footsteps crossed the hall. My sister's voice rose, casual, normal, like nothing had happened. I banged the door weakly with my fist, over and over, summoning everything I had left. Mom, I croaked. Silence. Then confusion. What's that noise? My mother asked. The footsteps came closer, faster now. The handle rattled. The lock turned. Light exploded into the room. I collapsed forward as the door swung open, my legs giving out completely. Strong hands caught me before I hit the floor. The sudden brightness burned my eyes. I heard my mother gasp, my father swear under his breath. Oh my God, my mother said, her voice breaking. What happened? I tried to answer. My lips moved, but no sound came. My sister stood behind them, face pale, eyes wide, not with guilt, but with shock that it had gone this far. She was joking, she said quickly. It was just. My father cut her off. How long? No one answered. They carried me out of the storeroom, past the hallway, past the couch where she'd laughed with her friend. Water was pressed to my lips. I coughed, choking, pain tearing through my chest. As my vision cleared, one thought cut through the fog with terrifying clarity. She hadn't planned to stop. If our parents hadn't come home when they did, the silence would have kept going. And so would she. I woke up on the couch with a blanket tucked too tightly around my shoulders and a pounding headache that made every thought hurt. The lights were dim. Someone had closed the curtains. For a moment, I didn't know where I was, and then the memory rushed back all at once, so hard it stole my breath. The storeroom. The dark. The lock. I jerked upright, heart racing, hands clawing at the blanket until my mother's voice steadied me.
Hey.
Easy. You're safe. Safe. The word felt unreal. She sat beside me, eyes red and swollen like she'd been crying for hours. My father stood near the doorway, arms crossed so tightly his knuckles were white. He didn't look at me at first. He was staring down the hall, toward my sister's room. "What time is it?" I whispered. "Late," my mother said softly. "You were dehydrated." In shock. "We almost took you to the hospital." Almost. The word echoed in my head the way the door had echoed my screams. I swallowed, throat still raw. "She locked me in," I said. Saying it out loud made my hands shake. "All day." My mother's jaw tightened. "We know." I turned my head toward my father. "Did she tell you?" He finally looked at me then, and the anger in his eyes scared me more than the dark ever had.
"She tried," he said.
At first.
Tried. Failed.
He told me what happened after I lost consciousness. How they'd demanded answers. How my sister had laughed it off at first, insisting I was exaggerating, insisting it was just a prank that went wrong. How that laughter died when my mother asked why the door had been locked from the outside. "She said you were being dramatic," my father continued, voice low. "That you needed to learn not to overreact." My chest tightened painfully. Even now, even after everything. "What did you say?" I asked. My mother reached for my hand and squeezed it hard. I asked her how she'd feel if it were her in that room. I already knew the answer. "She said she wouldn't panic," my father said flatly. "That she's stronger than you." Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. They'd grounded her, taken her phone, yelled,
Cried.
threatened consequences. Words, all of them. Necessary, maybe, but small compared to the hours I'd lost in the dark. "Where is she?" I asked. "In her room," my mother said. "She's not allowed to leave it tonight." I closed my eyes. A strange mix of relief and rage washed through me. She was comfortable. Federal hydrated. Alone but by choice, not force. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I drifted off, I was back in the storeroom, fingers numb, mouth dry, calling for help that never came. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat, heart racing like the lock had just clicked shut. Sometime after midnight, I heard a knock.
Soft.
Careful. I didn't answer. The door creaked open anyway. My sister stood there, arms crossed, face stiff. Not apologetic. Defensive. "You really made a big deal out of this," she said quietly. "Mom hasn't stopped crying." I stared at her, disbelief cutting through my exhaustion. "You locked me in a room for a day." She rolled her eyes. "I didn't think you'd freak out like that." Something in me hardened then, clean, sharp, irreversible. "I could have died," I said.
She scoffed.
"You're still alive." And in that moment, I understood something with brutal clarity. She didn't come to say sorry. She came to make sure I wouldn't tell this story louder than she could silence it. But it was already too late, because the door had opened, and I would never forget what she did when she thought no one was watching. Morning came quietly, like it was afraid of what it might reveal. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, warm and gentle, completely wrong for how my body felt, heavy, sore, and fragile, like I might shatter if I moved too fast. I lay still, listening to the house wake up. Cups clinked in the kitchen. The clock ticked. Life went on unchanged. I wasn't. My sister didn't come out of her room. I knew because I listened for her. Every sound still made my muscles tense, my heart spike. The lock clicking in the storeroom replayed in my head on a loop, sharp and final. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table later that morning. Both of them looked older than they had the day before, as if the truth had aged them overnight. My mother wrapped her hands around a mug she hadn't touched. My father didn't sit, he paced. "We failed you," my mother said quietly. Her voice broke on the last word. I shook my head, but the motion made me dizzy. "You didn't lock the door." "No," my father said, stopping abruptly. "But we didn't stop it sooner. They told me what they'd decided. Therapy for me if I wanted it. For her, whether she wanted it or not. No more being left alone together. No excuses labeled as jokes. No pretending this was normal sibling behavior. And if it ever happens again, my father added, his voice hard. There will be consequences outside this house. I believed him. Not because of what he said, but because of how his hands shook when he said it. My sister finally emerged that afternoon. She avoided my eyes, moving like a stranger in her own home. For the first time, she looked small.
Cornered.
Not powerful. She didn't apologize. Instead, she said, "Everyone's acting like I'm a monster." I looked at her, then really looked at her. At the girl who'd laughed while I begged. Who'd walked away when I said I couldn't breathe. Who'd only stopped because someone else had come home. "I don't care what you're acting like," I said calmly. "I care about what you did." She scoffed, but there was no confidence in it this time. She had lost something she didn't even realize she'd been holding: control. Recovery didn't come fast. Some nights, I still woke up gasping. I couldn't close doors fully for weeks. I drank water constantly, terrified of feeling that dryness again. The storeroom stayed locked, but not from the outside. My father removed the lock himself and threw it away. The click of metal hitting the trash echoed louder than any scream. People eventually moved on. Family always does. They prefer comfort over confrontation. But I didn't forget.
I didn't minimize it.
I didn't rewrite it into something softer, so others could sleep better at night. What happened in that room changed me. It taught me that cruelty doesn't always shout, it laughs. That danger doesn't always look angry, it looks amused. And that silence, when used as a weapon, can almost kill you. The door that trapped me was opened, but the truth it revealed never closed again.